right, good morning everybody. The day can only be great when the night before you ate perfectly and then you get up and you work out and you have your priming and practice session in the sun, grounding like, I don't care what comes at me today, like it's gonna be a great day no matter what. And you know what, that's the majority of my days. We've got all the tools at this point that we need to have amazing days, most days, even though I know that most of us, including myself, are not gonna be perfect with it all the time, but we've got everything that we need to make an amazing life, we really do. Like this is just such a beautiful, amazing journey. I'm so thankful to be engaged and like trying to optimize things on a daily basis, and then to be on this journey with you guys, helping to nudge you in the right direction. It is just a dream come true, it really is. I'm so thankful for this opportunity with you guys. So I'm here to tell you, you gotta make this meeting coming up this weekend, or Monday, whenever you're making the meeting, because it's gonna be a fun meeting. Since last meeting, I've always said this is kind of where it all gets downhill. I know some of us have struggled with the no dairy piece, and that's normal to be expected, just like pulling out carbs, just like when we transition from processed food to real food. We got some really good feedback already. Some people already noticed that without dairy in the deal, Carrie, that was for you in the deal. God, you got me self-conscious about that. Without dairy in the deal, some of us have already noticed a little less bloating, a little bit better energy levels. A lot of us didn't notice anything. That's kind of where I'm at with things. I feel like I kind of thrive on dairy, but you know, when I take dairy out, which is no problem for me at this point, I don't really notice anything. And then some people had a really, really difficult transition, and I think some people are still going through a transition without dairy. And I just want you to understand that it's all good. It's all part of the process. Just like we had that whole transition coming from, you know, whatever we were doing before to what we're doing now. Most of us went through 3 to 5 days of a funk, maybe a little bit longer. And then just like when we went through the low carb phase, we went through 3 to 5 days of a funk, maybe a little bit longer. You know, it's just to be expected. And the wisdom here is to have this experimental attitude with everything and just be like, okay, that's interesting. What is this going to tell me about everything? If I pull out dairy and I have a really, really difficult time with it, does that mean that dairy is good or bad for me? We don't know. We really don't know. What we do know is that the body's habituated to it, you know? So is caffeine good or bad for us? I think caffeine's great in small amounts, but at the same time, if I pull caffeine out completely, I'm gonna go through 2 or 3 days of feeling off and low energy levels, and then after that, I'll go back to my normal self. And it's kind of the same thing and the same attitude that we have to have with this whole deal. I think most of us are probably lucky enough that dairy feels like it's okay. And at the same time, we just need to be aware and have this, you know, like I've always been saying, like this experimental attitude with everything. The more of an impact that you noticed from pulling things out, okay, and this applies to processed food to real food, low carbs, without carbs to low carb, with dairy to without dairy, the more of an impact that it has on you, I think the more information it's giving you about how you can fine tune your way of doing things. And I think a really big message to take away from this entire experience, I want to make sure that I cover everything here. I'm probably going to have some distractions out here because I'm sitting outside the freaking front door. I'm asking for it here. So the wisdom here, I think one of the big takeaways is that, you know, we've always said this throughout the entire thing, we need to make sure that we have balance. Because balance means that we're not doing too much of any one thing, and therefore when we start to pull things out, it doesn't give us that big of a shift or a change, okay? So, you know, if I have a ton of carbs in and then I pull carbs out, like I'm probably gonna suffer a lot more than if I'm just doing carbs in moderation. If I eat nothing but meat all day long, every day, like I'm just a freaking meat eater, and I pull meat out, like I'm gonna go through some difficulties when I pull it out, you know, and it's the same wisdom here. I think that a big message that we need to understand here is that balance is important for a broad spectrum of nutrients and all the different things that we've learned up to this point, but also we want, you know, one of our ultimate goals with this program is freedom from everything. We want to be able to go through phases of with and without and in and out and ups and downs, and things not really bother us at all. I can't remember if I had a hard time the first time I pulled dairy out. I always have a hard time mentally and emotionally because I love cream in my coffee. You know, I have cheese here and there. I don't have a lot of it. You know, most days I'll have a little bit. But it's just, I pull it out now and it's just really not that big a deal. It's just one of those things that I have to do, and I go through it, and after 2 days of doing coconut milk in my coffee, like, it's really not that big a deal. That's the ultimate goal that we want to get with this program, is like, we want to have long-term freedom and flexibility, and know that we can go with and without things, and in and out, and bounce in and out of all these different phases, and really just for it not to be that big a deal. Make sure I'm covering everything that I want to cover here too. Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway. Big balance, and the more of an impact that having this stuff out has on you, whether it's the carbs or whether it's the dairy or anything else, then I think that's just giving you more information about how to fine tune and customize this thing for the long term. If you really struggled without having carbs, and if you really struggled without having dairy, what that means is you have to do it again, and you have to do it again, and you have to do it again, and you have to be mindful of your amounts and portions. Like if I'm really sensitive to carbohydrates, I can have a little bit in there, but I don't want to have a lot, because that means that I'm going to suffer when I pull them out. And if I'm really sensitive to dairy, I want to have it in there, but I just don't want to have a lot, so that I know that I'm not going to suffer as much when I pull it out. And then maybe some of us just notice, like, we just don't do good on carbs short term, or maybe we just don't do good on dairy. And the wisdom from this is to understand that whatever that is right now, that's probably going to change in the future, because as my digestive system strengthens, as my systems strengthen, it's going to open me up to more things. What we know is that the human body is meant to be extremely resilient and flexible. And the stronger it becomes, the more variety of things that you can tolerate, and the less issues you get from things and pulling things out and things. So I think I've been doing this for long enough now that things just don't faze me anymore. Not that I don't have the mental and emotional piece of it, but I think the ultimate goal is to strengthen the body to the point where you have a broad spectrum of things that you have access to, and not any one thing is overweighted too much, so that when you go through these phases of with and without, that it's just really not that big a deal. And I think I'm beating that up enough there, okay? So coming up to this meeting, let's make sure that we are dairy free. We're gonna do a really good reintroduction diet video here in probably the next few days, maybe early next week, where we go through the basics of an elimination diet, how to reintroduce things, which we're learning that in the progression here. Ideally, you would go through a little bit longer stints without things, so ideally you'd go 4 weeks or so without carbs, 4 weeks or so without dairy, to really notice the impact when you start to reintroduce. But I think 2 weeks is enough time for us to notice if it's going to have an impact on us. So to properly test at this meeting, we need to make sure that we're completely dairy free, and we're going to learn a new testing protocol that we're going to add to the whole self-awareness piece, and so that's going to be really fun. We should have done our starch testing up to this point, and we should have spent about 3 days on each individual safe starch to see what kind of an impact that has on us. The feedback that we've gotten from most people is they didn't notice much of anything with most of the starches, but some people did notice some reactions. So for me, I know what I've always known, which is that white rice I do really good on in moderate amounts. In large amounts, I get a rice hangover. White potatoes completely wreck me for the most part, even in small amounts. Sweet potatoes, kind of neutral. But I had this intuition, even though I don't notice some huge reactions from sweet potatoes, I have an intuition that white rice is just my clean burning thing, And I think most of us should have come out of this understanding, okay, maybe I had some minor reactions here or there, but intuitively I feel like I do really good on this starch. And so the takeaway from that is that when I'm making my own meals, I know that my preferred starches are going to be sweet potatoes, yams, and white rice. But if I'm going out somewhere else and someone else is prepping food, or I'm in a situation where, it's approved SHT stuff, but, maybe I don't do well on it, I can still tolerate things like white potatoes. It's just not my favorite thing that I'm going to make on my own. Love to hear about all the grounding experiences, and we've had a lot of practice sessions with the priming and practice and meditation, and some really good discussions around that. We'll probably have another one of those this coming Sunday. The more that you can do that with other people, the better, because you can sit and talk about your experiences. And love getting the feedback on the morning process. Like, it's just, I cannot emphasize how important and powerful and profound this is over the long term. And it's just like anything else. Like, initially it's uncomfortable. You don't know if you're doing it right, just like with working out or something. And then over time you start to get comfortable with it. You start to settle into it, and you really start to see some profound benefits from it. So, so make sure that you're committing to that process every single freaking morning. I mean, it is as important as anything else you could possibly imagine. More important, because it doesn't require anything. You just got to sit for the 20 minutes, 5-5-5, And if you need help with it, just reach out to us, because I love to practice with people. Coming up, we're going to learn further self-testing protocols at this meeting. We've only got 2 weeks left until the last meeting. I can't believe that. I mean, time has flown. But we're going to learn some new self-testing protocols so that we can reintroduce dairy properly. We're going to do the self-awareness testing. We're also going to learn about pulse testing and tapping into some of the body's innate intelligence. We're also going to talk a little bit about properly prepared legumes and what we can do to make legumes properly. And then we're going to have a little project where we try to make some lentils and some beans and some hummus over the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about meditation and mindfulness. We're going to answer any questions that we've had pop up over the past 2 weeks or over the entire progression, whatever. And like we've said before, at the last meeting, it's downhill from here. It's fun. Make this meeting. Remember, these meetings, no matter how on or off you've been with everything, the point is to continue with what you committed to in the beginning. That is making these meetings, learning this information. It doesn't matter how perfect you are with it. We need to learn it so that we have that in the background, because once you learn it, you can't unlearn it, and you can't help but make better choices with everything. Okay? There's so much love and support here for you guys. Looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Let us know if you have any questions, all right? Oh, make sure that you turn in your grade sheets or complete your grade sheets. Try to do that before the meeting because it just makes things a little bit more time conducive. And last thing, you are stronger than you realize. You know that, right? You're stronger than you know. You have all the education that you need to make profound, better choices over the long term. And even though we're not perfect with everything, we've got all the tools that we need to customize this thing to the way that we need to. Like at this point, you should have enough intuition about what things you do well on and what things you don't. So start using that information going forward. And remember, you are surrounded by allies. You've got us, you got our main office, you got me, you got Nicole, you got all the people that you're in the progression with, and you've also got our entire community that you can reach out to for support, right? So there's a ton of love and support here for you. Take advantage of everything that you've learned up to this point, put it into practice, and we'll see you at this next meeting. We love you guys so much.